Namaskar. Hello and welcome to P Guru's channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. This is episode 418 of Daily Global Insights, and joining me is my co-host Sridhar Chityalaji. Sridharji, Namaskar and welcome to P Guru's channel.
Namaskara and good morning to all.
Sridharji, I'm going to start with a video which shows the Russian airplanes downing of the US drone. Does this indicate that the world war is about to there, or is there an indication that there are alignments now beginning to take shape? We just take a look at this quick video, sir. All right, that tells you that the Russian plane was the one who fired at the drone. There's no doubt about that. Sridharji, what does this indicate? Now, this is the first time that Russia and US have faced off. A new turn in the world events, sir?
Very clearly, a new turn in the world events. Just to kind of encapsulate that video, what you saw is the drone in motion, and then you can see the Russian plane coming from behind. And if you actually amplify, there's an amplified version of the video. As it hit the drone, it also spilt oil, the fuel, jet fuel from the fighter aircraft the Russian pilot did, to almost adding insult to the injury. And now the Russian ships have hunked around that area to retrieve the drone. US is claiming that it is its property and nobody can take it, but we are in a war zone, a semi-war zone, if I have to use that phrase, when you attack a foreign country's drone. Now, to your point, Sriji, I think what we are witnessing is probably precursor to testing that is going on. We saw the Chinese balloons. We saw the Russian plane now take out, and then we also saw the same aircraft intruding into the NATO zone. The British and the German fighter pilots planes came and escorted the Russian jets out of the NATO zone. So, to answer your question, yes, it is yes. And you are also beginning to see around the world the alliances very similar to what happened in World War III. Clearly, Russia and China on one side, and you are beginning to see, we discussed about Argentina, we discussed about Bolivia, we talked about Venezuela. Now we are also, Honduras is also joining on the Latin American side. And then the Chinese prime minister, Chinese president went and formed patched up the relationship between Saudi Arabia as well as Iran, and and Qatar is also part of that. So you are seeing the formation of some kind of the World War III groupings emerging, and people, threatening each other in wherever the appropriate opportunities present themselves, Sriji.
Thank you, sir. Before we go to Credit Suisse, which is a bigger bank story, let's take a quick look at what happened in Silicon Valley Bank. How was it so quickly bailed out? We have to say the word bailed out. It was bailed out. So, the main reason that is now coming, I want you to fill it up, sir.
Well, I think the truth begins to come out in, what you call trickle feed. It seems like, it appears like they were much more focused, the board and the management, on the woke agenda, which seems to be widely prevalent in the Silicon Valley, support of BLM movement, support of social plan programs, many kinds of things. Now this is getting reported in the mainstream media or in the appropriate media. And it is also alleged now that a good chunk of the management money and SVB money was also donated to the Democratic PAC. And to the extent now that it's an embarrassment that, starting from Chuck Schumer, is beginning to refund some of the money that their respective constituents received in terms of the the party and the advocacy programs that they do. So you're beginning to see the snippets of this data come out. We also now know that there's a ex-Obama official on the board, ex-Clinton official on the board. Nobody is, pointing fingers, but the fact is, people are beginning to say, are these some of the reasons why very quickly, the SVB issue got resolved, notwithstanding the fact that there was no buyer after 2 rounds of auction that took place over that weekend. And now there's a third auction going on. There's no takers, only a private equity and probably a hedge fund group, which is looking at what parts of the assets can be taken. So there's much more than meets the eye. And this is a clear case of fiduciary internal failures, both at the board level as well as at the risk management level. And when the Department of Justice investigation, as well as the Securities Exchange Commission investigation is completed, we may probably get to know more truth than what meets the eye as to why this kind of went down so quick. And this is my prophecy that the mark-to-market valuation of their assets was not done. That clearly is a risk and a board failure. Had it been, all red lights would have gone up, at least from a supervisory point of view.
See, there are two observations. One is that this is $290 billion value assets. That's a big number, Siddharji, and that is something that is now dawning upon. I mean, Silicon Valley Bank was tucked away in some corner. I live in the Silicon Valley. I mean, it's not something that I would sit up and say, oh, it's as big as Wells Fargo or Bank of America. So that is one thing. The second thing, sir, is this mark-to-market that you mentioned. Would that be applicable to other banks also? Should the other banks proactively do this check to make absolutely sure their health is fine?
It is mandatory. That is how you do risk assessment. So everybody has to do mark-to-market valuation of their assets. That's how you determine, where you are heading and where there's an imbalance. I mean, in the case of Silicon Valley Bank, there's a clear imbalance between their deposits and their assets. Deposits are effectively liabilities. So the liabilities, the rates was going up, which is because our great Jerome Powell was raising rates, whereas they had assets which were held in long-term, medium to long-term assets. When the medium to long-term assets were priced at a specific point, which is relatively lower than the current market price for those assets, you have to necessarily do a haircut on the principal. So you will find that there is a clear imbalance, and this imbalance reached to such a level that they were forced to liquidate $20 billion worth of assets at a $2 billion loss, or $1.8 billion. I'm speaking from out of the mind. The risk one, tier one capital that was provisioned for SVB was somewhere between 16 and 18 billion. So effectively, the tier one capital, which is supposed to be a risk reserve, effectively got wiped out, basically because they had not done a proper risk calibration and revalidation of their assets. All red lights would have flared up if this was reported in their weekly reports to the Fed.
In fact, there's more news coming out that SVB had some cash infusions last year in billions to try and shore it up. I will get that data a little bit later. Siddharji, the next big one, Credit Suisse. Take it away, sir. What is the problem? How is it going to be solved, or is it being solved?
Credit Suisse problem is, just very similar to, but different to. When I say similar, tremendous fall in deposits. People began to withdraw this is client deposits from their wealth management business, corporate deposits sitting with the bank. And this has been going on for quite some time. It's been going on from 2022. The way I kind of phrase a Credit Suisse problem is the Credit Suisse business model was much more focused around private bank wealth management. Between UBS and Credit Suisse, they were considered the marquee leaders in the private wealth client management and wealth management business. They changed the business model. They started to go into investment banking. And once they started to go in investment banking, they had to allocate more and more of the capital to generate outcomes from their investment banking business. Their investment banking business has not done very well because it's very, very highly competitive. So that's one side of the business. They began to build up losses. The second is, which is far more, they began to see flight of deposits, significant amount of deposits. At one point of time, if my memory serves me correct, they were very close to $3 trillion Swiss francs, or somewhere between $2.5 to $3 trillion. The assets under management has shrunk to about $1.2 trillion. $1.2 trillion, big, big warning signs. Coupled with that, they had issues around their 2020 and 2021 statement of financial position and calibration of the risk assets. Some because the US were very, very particular, and they had to restate these numbers, and that took a lot of time. While that was going on, you saw the flight of deposits going out, and effectively clients telling, why should I put a deposit to do business with you? Why should I put, this is corporate clients, why should I put a deposit with you based on the business model? So somehow the management continues to come up with a plan. And as is often said, they say, we have a strong balance sheet, we have good tier one capital. The only thing that we have to do is we have to get our strategy right and recalibrate the business. The market and the clients outrightly declined this. So this is the situation they got themselves in. They got a $10 billion tranche of capital from the Saudis, and you saw that almost with the devaluation, the Saudis' capital got wiped out to the extent that they were heading towards almost $1.25 to $1.50. At $1.76 stock price, which is often the case, Swiss Banking Corporation came in and infused $55 billion. I mean, you can guarantee, almost take it as a guarantee, that Swiss Banking Corporation will support its two crown jewels, Credit Suisse and UBS, under any kind of circumstances because they're the marquee banks. Is that right thing to do? I don't believe so. But markets say, okay, they stepped in fast and they addressed the issue. But will the Swiss Banking Corporation tell Credit Suisse, you have to get rid of those businesses that are not core and get back to the core? Let us see what happens in due course.
Thank you, sir. And viewers, a fervent request to like this video. We are getting into things that probably nobody else has talked to you about in regards to what exactly is leading up to this banking crisis. And we are, again, at the tip of the spear. We are telling you a few things that perhaps is applicable to many banks. They need to go back and look at what they are doing. So please help us and like this video right now and make this thing go viral. We're doing okay, but we should be doing great. Thank you so much. And now let us take a look at the next topic. Sridharji, oil and interest rates are dropping. A little bit on that, sir, before we go into US news. There's some sensational news coming up, especially with regards to the Biden family.
Indeed. So I think the markets, it's natural that now Goldman Sachs says, the recession is almost imminent, 35 to 40% chances of recession. You can see what is happening in the markets. So what happens when you have recessionary headwinds or recessionary tailwinds, if you have to use the phrase? The first thing that will take the hit is oil. You can see oil has dropped almost 7%. If you're an oil importing nation like India, you will say rah, rah, rah. So it's now at the Brent is around $74 or $76 as I came in, and the WTI is around $70. They even actually dipped below $70. So you are seeing falling oil prices. The reason why the interest rates, especially the 10-year rates and the short term, which is 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, and 2 years is dropping is this alarming kind of situation around the deposit loans imbalances or deposits assets imbalances and the consequential effect of that. So there is a belief that we could have either a pause, which we have predicted that there will be a pause, but let's wait and see. Or now even there's a talk that there could be a 25 basis point cut, but there's very small segment of the analysts who point to a 25 basis point cut because of the prevalent situation and fears of this deposit assets imbalances.
Sir, let me take you back to the Obama era. There was a $3 million payout to the Biden family, a member of the Biden family, by a Chinese energy company. And now the House Oversight Committee has stumbled upon this. What do you think is going to happen, sir? We already have the Hunter Biden laptop investigation going on. This appears to be a direct trail where $3 million reached a member of the Biden family, and he was still the vice president at that time.
Correct. I think that is these payments were not directed to one person. They were directed to several people under the Biden family. They have the House Oversight Committee has transactional records, amounts, and to whom this money was sent based on the information that is now available to them from the Department of Treasury. You remember going back in time, we covered in DGI when this information was sought. Janet Yellen refused. She said, we don't give reports to Republicans or Democrats, but we give to a House committee. So this is the House Oversight Committee. So this request has come from the House Oversight Committee, which is now under the Republican hands. So this is the first snippet of information that is coming out. They have the same House Oversight Committee. Some of the Republican members have information of money received into Wells Fargo bank account, which again we talked about in the DGI, and that is to come. And whether they came from CCP or some of the energy companies in China, that's another revelation that is going to come out. And what else is on that laptop? You remember the connections to I forget the name of that entity in Ukraine, which is in energy distribution. Burisma. So there's more and more information that is going to be coming out because the Department of Justice or the Archival Department of Archival Department, they cannot hold back any information any further, because of the information that is being sought in a proper way through the channels.
Now, there's also one other Ukrainian bank that completely got scoped out, completely culled out of all its deposits, and the money is supposedly used to buy real estate in Texas and in the state of Georgia, Sridharji. Any idea on that? What is happening?
No, sir. No, I haven't tracked that story. But if I do get some insights, we'll cover that. So no, sir. Sorry.
There is a Biden connection there too. That's why I'm asking all these questions, sir. I mean, amazingly, a lot of questions get asked. None of them seems to be getting answered where the logical end is in sight. India is becoming US or US is becoming India. I don't know. The politicians world over are the same. That's all I can say. Now let's go on to next question, sir. In India, PM Modi will be traveling to Japan, Papua New Guinea, and Australia in May to further advocate Indo-Pacific Forum and cement relationship. Almost 2 years later, US confirms Garcetti as the ambassador to India. Sir, touch upon both these events, sir. Please take it away.
Right. So you can see the realignment of the geopolitics. You got Blinken going around. He just finished Central Asia. Then he went to Middle East. Defense Secretary went to Middle East. Then he's now in Africa. And then you have Chinese president was in Middle East. Then he went to Central Asia. Now he's going to be going and meeting with Putin. So on the Indo-Pacific and this, I don't know what exactly, I forgot the name, the Southern Global South initiative. So Modi has got his own agenda and program, which is, by the way, supported by a vast number of Western nations. So he is going around and talking about, democracy and having a rules-based approach and fair trade, etc. So it's wonderful to see India as a leader moving around, building bridges and forming partnerships with various nations, leveraging the vacuum in global leadership and cementing its position as a trusted nation to work with. in the days and years to come when the world is going to be confronted with any type of crisis.
Sridharji, about the ambassador's appointment to India, Garcetti, the delay looks like it was more on the United States side, where they were asking some tough questions of Garcetti, of his support to his aide, who had some, scandals and things like that. How did that get resolved, sir? Now that he's back, he's going to India.
No, I think that the root of the issue is his chief of staff seems to have had inappropriate behavior with the chief communications strategist of Garcetti, and the belief is that the Garcetti tolerated, accepted, did not condone, and obviously did not enforce any stringent action against that behavior. This became the root of the topic, and probably there are other issues surrounding Garcetti. Why Biden continued to insist Garcetti is the right person to go to a strategic nation, India, is a mystery. There's lots of what we call as unofficial gossip that gets around in terms of his woke principles and woke approaches, and why he is being sent, given that India doesn't believe in the woke approach. Anyway, so I think they eventually got it because of this long pending position. But it's good that there will be somebody in India. And given the strategic nature of Biden-Modi relationship, we expect these things will be further cemented, and there is somebody locally on ground carrying forward the agenda of Biden and Mr. Blinken.
Well, by the way, if you look at the initial statements of Mr. Garcetti, he appears to have swallowed the USC IRF reports about India hook, line, and sinker. We know the veracity of those reports. So it would behoove him to kind of look at the other side of the story before he comes out with his statements. Anyway, the more important thing is, I think there may be a return visit from Biden to India after the state visit of Modi to US. And for a state visit of a US president to be in a country like India, the country has to have an ambassador in place. That is it's a requirement, I believe. I don't know if this is true or not, so I just wanted to put it out there. But there are some protocols that have to be followed. I just take that from me. Let's go to the next one. The ground station of the jointly developed India-Bhutan satellite was inaugurated in Thimphu, the capital city of Bhutan. Indian IT minister addresses the Silicon Valley and pitches India's banking system as stable and supportive. First Indian semiconductor fab announcement in a few weeks, says India's Union Minister Vaishnav. Sridharji, please take it away, sir. Do you think India can be a counterbalance to the banks like SVB?
Now, first, I want to address Nepal. I think Nepal is very strategic because...
Sorry, it's Bhutan that we talked about.
Sorry. Bhutan.
Yeah.
I want Bhutan at Thimphu is very strategic because Bhutan is the epicenter of the China-India clashes. So there is a ground receiving station, plus there is a satellite launch that took place, which is of strategic importance to India, and I think it's a great event, and it's also a milestone event from the perspective of India, Bhutan, as well as India's strategic security threats emerging from that side of the world. Now, with regard to the question that you have asked, the banking system is far more stable within the context of the way the regulatory framework works in India. So therefore, I think that I'm not an expert on Indian banking, but we don't have insured and uninsured deposits, I believe. I think almost all of the deposits are either insured or all of the deposits have, some kind of protection caveat in them. There also may be rules in terms of how these deposits needs to be deployed because deposit is a liability, and if you have a counterbalancing asset that generates the income for these liabilities or deposits, then there are a set of rules that are prevalent. So what the Indian IT Minister, Mr. Rajiv Chandrasekhar, is saying is that our banking system is far more stable. We will not let you exposed as it happened in the case of Silicon Valley Bank, and suddenly you find yourself deprived of the much needed cash to run your ecosystem. That will not happen in India. And so therefore we encourage you to come and do banking and have your footprint in India. So that is his overarching presentation. And If I have to believe, anything that we look at within what we call as the non-traditional banking, SVB is not your regional bank. SVB is not your community bank. SVB is not your large money center bank. Well, it is a bank which sits somewhere between all these institutions. It is right now it is considered as a normal special purpose kind of a bank, and this is one of the reasons that SVB has faced the challenge that it has faced, and that probably will be addressed very soon in the regulation.
Sridharji, couple of comments about banking in India. As far as I know, and viewers, please chime in via comments. As far as I know, the insurance equivalent of the FDIC 250K in US is 1 lakh, but it is 1 lakh per family. In other words, if you have four accounts in a bank, all four combined will still only get you 1 lakh. Whereas in the United States, you can have four accounts in the same bank of the same name, and each one is insured up to $250,000. There is a big disconnect, sir. 1 lakh rupees is hardly, 10,000. I don't know. It's very, very small number in terms of dollars. I think something is, I mean, there needs to be more substance in what India is laying out. And India's KYC is one of the most laborious. That's all I can say. Too procedural for my liking. There's a lot of changes have to be happening. It's nice to hear that India is saying that you come and bank with us, but I would like to see the details before I make any more comments. Canada-based Ontario Teachers Pension Plan (OTPP), one of the world's largest pension funds, is betting big on India to achieve its target of hitting 300 billion in net assets by 2030. Sridharji, again, here it's a straightforward thing. Somebody from US or Canada puts the money in, they get a guaranteed rate of return. As long as that happens and there are no retroactive taxation or any such thing where you can clearly see so much is the interest that I can take out, everything will be fine, sir. But India will have to be at least 2% more than US, isn't it?
Has to be hedged against the interest rate differential and the currency differential. It has to generate an attractive yield, whether it is 200 or 250 basis points more than what you would get in US is an absolute minimum. Otherwise, you'll see flight of investments. But what is important to conclude or draw inference from this is there's a significant amount of focus in two specific areas in terms of allocation of capital from overseas institutions. One is infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. Infrastructure seems to be receiving a significant amount of allocation of capital from a number of large pension funds and fixed income managers. So that's one part of the story. The second part of the story is there is also money flowing now into both large cap, into large cap, mid cap, as well as small cap. Previously, you saw money flowing only into large cap and mid cap, but there's also money trickling into small cap, which implies that when I think I've made this point several times, when you have an economy on a trajectory from 3 trillion or 3.5 trillion to 5 trillion, naturally that trajectory is driven by the underlying corporations and underlying businesses that are sitting within the ecosystem. The money is very attractive in terms of the returns that it can generate in an economy like this, because China is slowing and China is going to struggle even to achieve 5% growth. This is the general belief in the market. So this is the reason why large fund managers are now beginning to allocate to India more and more capital.
Thank you, sir. And in Asia-China news, Nepal seeks easier access to Chinese markets for much expansive range of products to reduce trade deficit. Will they get it? That's a question. Taiwan's new presidential candidate, William Lai, pledges to protect Taiwan against China and ensure peace. Sir, a little bit about the Taiwan thing first, before that about China. Before that about Nepal.
If you all recall, the present prime minister was an orchestrated Chinese campaign to get the communists, Mr. Oli's party, as well as the Congress, which is now running the government, So these guys suddenly realize that China is their pally ally. There is a significant amount of trade imbalance. Almost everything is imported from China as opposed to anything going back from Nepal. So Nepal is making a claim or plea, now give us access to more markets. Imagine Nepal being given, no, China wants to usurp Nepal. It's not Nepal is not going to be given more access. It's very wishful thinking, but this is where they are trying to make a case with Mr. Xi Jinping. As far as I'm concerned, this Joshua is the successor to the current president. She quit the party because of the loss in the municipal elections, but her successor nominee is also pro-Taiwan, pro-independence, and very strong U.S. ally. And those are the statements that are coming out from him, Sriji.
And again, yours, Nepal wanted to merge with India in 1947. In his infinite wisdom, Nehru turned it down. These are all Nehru decisions. It's got nothing to do with others. Same thing about Kalat. It's a huge mistake to let Kalat go. And same with Peshawar. Anyway, the story for another day. Let's move on to the next one. We will look at what is coming up next. 1 second, sir. Japan and Germany to meet on March 18 to develop new trade framework that would minimize dependency on China. Japan to lift 3 important export curb restrictions on hydrogen fluoride, fluorinated polyamide, and photoresist, important elements for LED panel manufacturing. Military supply chain cooperation between the two countries is also on the cards. This is again a new one, pre 1945 all over again, or 1938 all over again.
Exactly. I think there are 3 very specific instances which are of strategic importance. First and foremost, I think Germany is now saying Japan is a strategic ally. And so therefore, let's sit down and discuss 2 things. One is trade framework, investment framework, and new supply chain logistic cooperation, and how we can collaborate. It's quite amazing in terms of the nature of engagement that Japan is now driving with some of the other nations, or Germany is driving with the other nations. The most important thing about this LED panel supplies that Korea, this has been in place for more than 6, 7, 8 years. And, as you all know, Korea is one of the largest manufacturers of LED panels, especially with Samsung and LG and other electronic manufacturers. So they had some difficulties with regard to getting the supply expensive. But now this was a retribution to the problem that Japan and Korea have had. They seem to have patched up. It's not only symbolic, but it's very significant within the context of breaking the barriers. So they're expanding that even further. So you're beginning to see Japan, Korea around the Korean Peninsula, Japan, Korea, and United States around that Korean Peninsula. You're beginning to see Germany coming in and forming a partnership with Japan. Then you have the Quad nations forming partnership with, Japan is part of the Quad. In addition to that, India and Japan and Australia, Japan have their own kind of strategic, 2+2 partnerships. So what you are seeing here is a plethora of realignment, and very clearly China is not in any of it, nor Russia is in any of it in these new partnerships. There's one nation, though, which is sitting there and which is an ally, very strong ally of both Russia and China. That's North Korea.
Yes, indeed. And in Europe news, Putin says Russia is fighting for its own survival as Bakhmut battle wages on. Russia offers to extend Ukraine grain deal by 60 days, offering much needed relief to food supply chains. Russian president on Wednesday was hosting talks with Bashar al-Assad, the Syrian president, to mend ties between Syria and Turkey. Now, quickly touch upon this, sir, and then we have a couple more news items to go through.
So I think that the story around Bashar and Vladimir Putin as well as Erdogan is again realignment of the geopolitics. They're trying to facilitate a conversation and says collaborate. So who are they going to work against? They're going to work against the U.S. forces in southern Syria. Who are they going to work against? They're going to work against the Peshmergas and the Kurdish fighters, because they seem to think that's the common enemy. And the Kurdish fighters are the ones who starved off the ISIS and other extremist elements in that part of the world. Very interesting developments, and we'll see where Iraq goes. Clearly, Iran is very close to both Russia as well as to Syria. So it's interesting to see where Iraq goes. As far as the what's the other one I missed out, Sriji?
One second, sir. My just one second. It was no, you covered it, sir. The Ukraine grain deal by 60 days.
That's very important because you remember that the grain movement is mitigating lot of supply. Wheat is both Russia and Ukraine is one of the big suppliers of wheat to the universe. They're also big suppliers of fertilizers. There seems to have been a very close orchestration between United Nations and some of the nations. Possibly China was also behind it to make sure that there's some goodwill generated. So it's very good. The way this works is the custodian of the Black Sea is Turkey. United Nations is part of it. So all shipments that go through, be it Ukrainian ships or the Russian ships, they're supervised and monitored by both Turkey and United Nations, and the grain shipments go through. Allowed this 60 more days, so there's no disruption to the supply chain.
Yes, and somebody has corrected me saying that it is 5 lakhs per account in India. So it's like, $5,000, $5,500 per account. When you have deposits coming in, foreign currency, perhaps the threshold for insurance has to be separately treated. I don't know if they are going to do that. $5,000 will not move the needle. You would need it, excuse me, in the same range as what is presently in place in the United States. So I'm just giving the numbers out there, but thanks for setting me straight. It's not 1 lakh anymore, it's 5 lakhs. So that is good. Let's take a look at what UK is saying. The United Kingdom wants to have forthright and confrontational conversation with China if necessary. British Foreign Secretary tells CNA after signing the AUKUS landmark submarine deal, China is more destructive than constructive on Ukraine deal, says Lithuanian president addressing EU leaders. German Chancellor Scholz wants China not to use force to change Taiwan status quo. Sir, everybody is now beginning to talk against China from Europe. What brought about this change?
I think it's very clear. China openly aligned itself with Russia. That has put much strain between the erstwhile even supporters of China within Europe to be much more antagonistic, and they just do not accept the Chinese position. They also do not accept the Chinese position of supplying, though China denies, ammunition and materials for Russia to continue the war, notwithstanding the fact there are sanctions in place. So this is clearly antagonized. Some of the Eastern European nations, the erstwhile Soviet republics, Lithuania, Latvia, etc., they all have had very similar issues that they faced with Russia with regard to their freedom and entitlements and rights and etc. They see Taiwan in same light. So that is why these 12 Eastern European nations are completely against any Chinese status quo change in Taiwan, Sriji, and that's what you're beginning to see. And very clearly, Britain and Germany and France have now become the front runners from Europe point of view to hold their position as far as China is concerned and potential disruption in Taiwan.
And now some Middle East news. Reports of the death of Israeli Gulf ties because of the announcement on Friday of a renewal of Saudi-Iranian relations are greatly exaggerated, says Israeli ambassador to Bahrain. Israel, following the close relationship forged with UAE and now looking at expanding accord with Bahrain as part of the peace deal, with Saudis closely following or watching Israeli footprint. Is Israel heading to civil war on proposed judicial reforms? That's a new item, sir. About the Saudi and Iran, we're going to get a perspective at 8 p.m. today with Major General Rajiv Narayanan. We're going to talk about it in much detail, so please do tune in for that one. Sridharji, I'll just let you touch upon this, but the other one about judicial reforms in Israel, civil war, that sounds like a new item, sir.
It is. I think as far as the Israel, Bahrain, and UAE is concerned, The Bahrainian leader has stood up and basically said, we are now trying to establish relationship with Israel along the same lines that Israel and UAE have. UAE and Israel have, UAE and Bahrain has a very close relationship. Remember that the security apparatus for protecting the oil fields of Saudi is actually in Bahrain. And it's very interesting the way China forged relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iranians. Depending on whom you talk to, they don't believe that this particular deal will last as much as the past historical deals that was stitched up between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So this is the sentiments that you are hearing from both Israel and Bahrain. But let's wait and watch and see. One of the things that we haven't kind of touched on is that there was considerable problem for Benjamin Netanyahu when he took over with persistent judicial interference. So he said that through his parliament, he will introduce reforms and begin to introduce the changes. So those changes are now being implemented and enforced. And Israel is a razor thin difference between the right, center, and the left. So you are now beginning to see considerable part, even from within IDF, people protesting and against these reforms and against interference by the government into the judiciary. It is growing, and we will cover this in most of the DGIs that in future, because it remains to be seen how this will pan out. And it's a very significant event, not just for Israel, but if any change has to come in many other parts of the world.
Sridharji, we have 2 or 3 questions. If you don't mind, shall we take them?
Sure, Ji.
Can we go back and start looking at Ask Sridhar hashtag items, and then Sridharji will try to answer them? I have one here while my guy looks it up. This is the last one. A Nobel laureate has hinted that Modi ji is a strong contender for Nobel Peace Prize. Is it an offer for cooling him to side with the West? Actually, he has withdrawn that statement now. So it's, I think, much storm in a teacup. There isn't anything like that. Ignore it. Sridharji, let's move on. That one is that he has himself come out and said this is false news. Magnet Ranga wants to know, Namaskaram, your views on India allowing foreign legal firms to operate in India.
Well, I think that India has to be an open democracy. So therefore, as long as they comply with the norms, the Indian judicial system, you can't, for example, if you are in Australia, if you are a US legal firm, you have to follow the Australian legal system for you to practice. Of course, you can operate in Australia and represent Australian clients in United States. So I support the notion that India should be brave to have legal firms with appropriate rules established for them to do business. Now, Constitution, what does Constitution permit? I'm not an expert. Sriji can probably bring a constitutional expert to comment on, or he himself, whether they will be able to expand the scope and reach to practice within in India. I don't know. But I would say legal firms, yes, please. I would not stop them.
Well, if foreign lawyers come in, the legal expenses just started going up, but it will also increase competition. There will be pressure on the judges to rule quickly. Somebody from US is going to come and sit in India and run up the bill. They're not going to be happy on a tariq pe tariq. So there is going to be pressure on the judiciary also. I think it's a good move. Some of the fat cats get paid too much to just get an adjournment. Next question, sir. Are there any big European banks which are going SVB? We talked about Credit Suisse. Anything else, sir?
No, I think the large banks, both in United States and Europe, are now fairly well capitalized. They have put a considerable amount of risk as well as rigor in their operational frameworks. They have been stress tested. They mark-to-market valuation of their assets is also been ascertained. The challenge with Credit Suisse is not something that came out of the blue. The Credit Suisse has been under the radar because of the imbalance between their business models. I think the markets somehow locally or globally, the markets did not sign off on their investment banking thesis. And also the corporates who have accounts with Credit Suisse did not accept this notion that they have to be treated like a wealth management client with large pool of deposits, institutional deposits sitting with them. So Credit Suisse has got a problem which is very similar to some of the other banks in terms of the nuances of deposits and the business model.
Last question for me, and I'll answer this and then we'll call it a wrap. Since you are from the Silicon Valley, how did the wokeism not affect you? How did you protect yourself from the woke culture? Silicon Valley believes in exceptionalism and in meritocracy. This is the last bastion of meritocracy, if you ask me. Wokeism is trying to come in, but it's not really making a big dent. There will be people who will say these kinds of things. California has some of the most strictest green energy laws. And for that reason, it doesn't even drill off the coast of California, where there are lots of oil deposits, guaranteed. And they don't drill. So there are lots of things about California that people still are understanding. Silicon Valley continues to be an oasis. I don't know for how long, though. So I do have some concerns. Thank you very much. Oh, last question. Shrey Cheda wants to know, should India start investing in African continent's infrastructure?
They're committed. They should, because Africa is a very strategic. I think we have covered this in the most kind of underreported story is the combined African economy is $1 trillion. When you look at the combined African economy as a unit, it has probably grown very well. It is much with plenty of resources and plenty of opportunities for India to both from culturally as well as from and politically. I think India should definitely focus and continue to sustain and build its momentum with the African continent. So I would certainly endorse. Sir, I have a response. Sri Ji there is no wokeism in his DNA. So it is deeply rooted in his DNA. So therefore, you can't find DNA. Even if he's surrounded by wokeism, I think his DNA would not allow him to kind of resonate into the wokeism model. That's my observation.
Thank you so much, sir. Viewers, will be back again in 2 days' time. And please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell button for notifications. Please also download my app, Sri Iyer. It is available on both App Store in iPhone ecosystem as well as Google Play on Android ecosystem. I have to tell you this because if you want to buy my new book, or my bestseller, Who Painted My Money White, that's the only way you can do it right now. Amazon has still not re-enabled selling of that book. That was selling like gangbusters. Right now, there is a void. I'm trying to fill it up as quickly as I possibly can. So do consider downloading my app and buying it from there. Thank you very much, Sridharji. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Have a wonderful day.